that I'm recording. And this, and this, and this. Oh, and this one. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, back live with the Louis B. Free radio show, Brain Food from the Heartland. And I am so delighted, thrilled, and honored to have returning to the show, Kay Cooke. And I've got my Happy Brain book right here too. I love what you do, Kay. So a little bit about yourself, your background, before we get into the new book.
Okay, thank you, Louis. It's wonderful to be back. So thank you very much for asking me. Well, a little bit about myself. I have a background in health promotion, in education, in business. I've been working in the coaching, training, therapy world for a great number of years now. And I've written a few books. And my big passion, above all else, is somehow to get something like Happy Brain classes into every primary school so that children learn from the very beginning how their brains work, how their thoughts are formed and organized, how they can self-manage their feelings and make better decisions to drive good behaviors or more appropriate behaviors.
And it's so... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Kate. Go ahead.
Well, just that it just seems so crazy that we spend so much time and attention and money on trying to heal the adults in the world, where so much of ill health, poor mental health, and just poor relationships, poor decisions, it could all be headed off if we put in place the right preventative measures. So that's my sort of absolute sort of passion, if you like.
Well, and I love that, because again, if you give them the foundation of that, and we hear all the time about mental health crisis, and I get it, everybody's got something going on, but it's how you manage it. Correct? How your brain processes it. I mean, we hear that all the time. I remember reading one of the top words that school kids had for last year was anxiety. And I get concerned, Kay Cooke, because we hear it all the time. Well, people are anxious and anxiety, and it's almost like feeding it into the brain. And your expertise in this is wonderful. I don't have that expertise, but when you hear that and people say, well, kids are anxious and they've got anxiety, it's almost like putting in their head, correct?
Absolutely. So that what I would call that the social narrative. So what I mean by that is it's a mass hypnosis that is being put into not only the heads of children, but the heads of the adults supporting the children. And so we come up with labels and terms like anxiety, and then people either fear it and therefore become anxious, or they use it as an excuse to not have fulfilling and successful lives. And so we don't question, we don't challenge these principles that, these are just words, they're just labels. And my work, as you know, is much more about, okay, so how are you doing that state of consciousness? What is happening in your brain and your body? How do you experience it? What has triggered it? What do you know from the past that will stop it? Because there's nothing wrong with it happening, but how do we end it sooner? And you can do that by yourself when you know how. So when we start to stretch it out and look at it with more attention and consciousness, we start to undo some of that social hypnosis, which is not good.
It's not good. Again, we're putting those thoughts and labeling, and again, one of the ways that we speak, people will say, and I call myself on it, and I get, the older I get, the more, I shouldn't use the word obsessive, the more curious I get if I'm using a word correctly and accurate. I mean, you'd be surprised when I look up, is that right? I was, again, I shouldn't say obsessed, right? But it's like when you say but, doesn't it kind of negate what you just said? and what are the alternatives for it? Because sometimes it fits, yet is a good way instead of but. But I wonder about that and what gets into our heads with certain words and things. And you're almost telling kids that with a pandemic, even prior to that, they're anxious. And what I was going to say about anxious is a lot of people will say, and I'm not sure if this in the UK, if this is like this, but instead of eager, they'll say anxious. And it's you're eager to, you're not anxious. You know,
if you strip away the word anxious, what you're generally experiencing is your body preparing to take an action. So, and those feelings you could call something else. The body is preparing to take an action. The question is it a useful action or but quite often people, well, an example might be you would be walking down the street and you might hear the sound of a very loud, fast car. And in that moment, your so-called anxiety would rise in response to the auditory sound. That would make great sense. Your body is preparing to take an evasive action based on some external stimulus. But that's very different to lying in bed when there is no external threat and just feeling that same intensity from some thoughts that you've had.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And again, the words that we use to describe others or self-describe are very, very powerful.
And not just words, absolutely. And as you know, I'm a trainer in Neuro Linguistic Programming, and I love the technology. And linguistic, the middle part, focuses exactly on that, on the power of words, the way that we sequence words, the way that we drive attention in the other person or ourselves towards the future or the past or the present or our sensory experience. You know, if I say to you now, Louis, you know, how's your big toe? You hadn't thought of that until I directed your attention to it. Yeah. The power of language is exquisite, especially when it's used with precision. But it is more than just the words. There is the sound, the tone, the song that goes with the words, and that comes from emotional state. So you can say a swear word in 5 different emotional states, and they will feel differently each time you hear it, depending on what's you might say intention behind it, but it's more than that, what's actually being conveyed. And you know, this is important because we were talking off air about authenticity, and there is something where people go, I have a prescription of using these words, and I know these words are very effective. But if the chemistry behind it, if the emotions behind it don't match the words, then it creates a dissonance within the person, but also within the receiver. And then it begins to unsettle people at a subconscious level.
You know, when you say that, Kay Cooke, I'm thinking about when you said the swear word, I'm thinking about one in particular, and we can say them. I mean, I can do the adult disclaimer if you like. The Louis B. Free Radio Show, Brain Food from the Heartland, is an adult-oriented show intended for and only for a mature adult audience. Listener discretion is strongly advised. But see, then when I do that, then I don't want to say it. I just, you know, yet
well, an easy one. Choose an easy.
Well, I'm thinking of the one, you know, one word. Yeah, word that how it can be when you say that, it can be that I blanking love that, or F him, or I got into such a I think jam with, you know, and it's interesting because so many different ways that you can use the same word for
And you know, it's so topical because I was watching, I've been a bit fascinated by the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. It's just so interesting because I'm sat thinking as a juror, who doesn't understand the law, how would a layperson be influenced by the people giving evidence? And that is fascinating. And there's all sorts of clever play and clever language.
Yeah.
But the first filter for the human being is something way deeper. We monitor micro expressions and the sound waves. So there was an expert giving some whatever they call it, deposition, I think.
Yeah.
Testimony.
Yeah. Testimony. Yeah.
And I couldn't really listen to his words, because everything else that was going on with him was obscuring my ability to focus on what he was saying. I was focused on the process of his delivery, which sounded agitated, it sounded angry, it sounded, and that alarms my brain. And so so it's very complex, the way that we use words and music to communicate.
That's wonderful. Any other comment on that trial? Do you mind? Well, since you mentioned it, because I know people are fascinated with it, and people are very polarized by who they believe or who they don't believe. But what are your thoughts?
Well, on the higher level, I would say my dad has a saying, which is, if you want to see a man's true character, give him everything. And I think what we're seeing is some people who have had access to absolutely everything. And I don't think human beings really are good with having everything. And I think history does show that.
I agree.
I think I am a huge Johnny Depp fan, so hands up. I don't particularly like Amber Heard, but those long before any of this trial stuff. That was my opinion. But when you hear the dreadfulness of a toxic, destructive, unhealthy relationship being played out, in public, there's something really really disgusting about that. Because on one hand, I think, to my shame, I can think of relationships or moments in relating where I have said and done things that I absolutely regret and should never have said or done. And I know people have done the same. We're all capable of that human way of interacting with another person. And then you bring drugs and alcohol into the equation, all the filters go, and it gets a bit crazy. So that's my sort of general view on the sadness that this is being brought to light. And I can see how it has happened. But the fascinating bit for me is the way that the legal system works so hard to play the law. And we're back to the language again. They're working so hard to influence, consciously and unconsciously, the jury ultimately. And that is just I find it really interesting. And it's an imperfect system, just like education. And
of course,
an imperfect.
When you say that again, and I haven't seen a lot of it, but I've seen clips, excerpts of it, and it is interesting. It's interesting how it goes down, how it's going down. So, and I know they're almost ready to wind up, aren't they?
Apparently, we'll know. Yeah, I think so. I think Friday it winds up. So.
Wow, that's interesting observations for Kay Cooke. Again, I keep saying I want to get into to the new book, but that happy brain, again, teaching kids the importance of it. And I always want to say, especially in today's world, but anytime, giving the kids the tools. Education is great. It's great to teach kids, math and vocabulary, et cetera, et cetera. It's great. History, but to give them the tools personally that you do with Happy Brain, that will stay with them for a lifetime. It should be in all the schools everywhere, correct?
I think so. That's my sort of big, huge, unbelievably great goal, as they call it, which would be to have these simple classes in primary school. it's more than that, though. My work with children does matter, and it is about prevention and building a much stronger and more conscious new generation. But it is also a stealth way of getting to the adults, the parents, through the children, because we have to educate the whole system. You know, the children don't operate in isolation. They go back into a home, and if the home is violent or
Toxic. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
in some way toxic, that is going to have a big impact on that child's ability to function well in school. And there's so many factors involved in I think we've talked about this before, but the reason I started the Happy Brain Project in 2010 was I was given some funding by the UK Arts Council to go into schools and help teachers. The brief was to help teachers and children overcome barriers to learning. And I thought that's really interesting, because if you take that literally, help them to overcome barriers to learning, it doesn't make sense on any level, because our brains are magnificent learning machines. So they are learning. The question is, what were they learning? And what the project really wanted to ascertain was how to help them learn the national curriculum. And that's a different matter. And so you look, okay, so what's the barrier to the children learning whatever the national curriculum is, the educational curriculum is? And then we have to come further down in the brain to go, okay, so you have a brain that's malnourished, that's dehydrated, that's on high alert because of a toxic home life, or a distorted thought pattern in the child, that they've heard something in the playground and all they can obsess about is, you know, are they going to lose their friends forever? If those things are present, it stops the child or children opening up their full brain to taking in new information, because when a brain's in super stress mode, it reverts to what it knows rather than what it doesn't know.
That's very interesting. And I love that, because you want to influence of course, the teachers and the parents and all the adults with it. It becomes very all-encompassing.
Yeah.
And like you say, it's tough, because again, I've talked with a lot of folks over the years about, you know, childhood and different things, and childhood trauma, if you will, or whatever. And you have to, it's interesting to me when, if there was violence in the home, and then the kids take that on. And my thing is like, so your dad was abusive to your mom. How did that make you feel as a little kid? You had to be terrorized and frightened and very bad. Why would you perpetuate that? It's choices we make.
Yes and no, but
Tell me.
The child, from when you look at it from the outside, you go, oh my God, that poor child. But if it's all the child knows, then it's familiar to the child. And so the brain, the child's brain is just making a pattern of that. This is familiar behavior, therefore it's normal behavior, therefore this generalizes through all areas of life. Yes, often when they get to adulthood, they can take a detached view and go, oh, now I've got behaviors, or I see behaviors and I don't like that. But in the moment of encoding, so to speak, the brain just goes, this is familiar, this is within my support system that I am safe within. Even though they're not safe, it's to the brain, it's all they know. So that's, you know, why people end up staying in very unhealthy relationships for long periods of time. The brain likes familiarity. It's the easiest way to predict the future, is to go, oh, right, I've seen this or heard this before. What do I know from the past? Now I can predict how the future is going to be. And that gives a sense of certainty, to maybe a bit of certainty, or even uncertainty. So the certainty of uncertainty is still a familiar pattern. So yeah, it's...
when you say that, Kay Cooke, one of the things that I think about, and I've talked about this on the show, is I was sexually abused as a child, and I always wondered, as I was thinking about when I got older, what did I do to, what signs did I get to this? So, and I'm not Catholic, but it was a priest, and it was it's a very weird story how that all transpired. But I thought, what signs did I give? And I came upon a picture of myself at that age, and of course this sounds, of course, logical, of course it becomes an of course. I didn't do anything, but it was interesting. It's like, oh my God, look at that little nerdy, jerky looking kid with the crew cut or whatever. I was a child, but you don't think about, you get into the self-blame. What signs did I give? And it was a real, like, I will say, wake up call for me.
Yeah.
Because
a lot of healing work is about connecting to that small child.
Yeah.
We all have a small child within us, and it can be quite wonderful to be guided into going back and connecting with that young child and giving it what they didn't have at the time. And the inner world, the inner child work can be hugely healing.
When you say that again, when you say about the familiarity, it reminds me of, when I was first starting again, I won't go on and on about this, but when I first started to have the memories of it, and there's a lot of people that will discount the retrieved memories or whatever. Well, that's not it. Somebody put it, whatever, to discount it. And the way I describe it is, so if I went to my grandmother's house and was looking around in the attic, and there were Louis' albums, and I look through there and I see, oh my God, the Lemon Pipers, Green Tambourine. What do I say? I forgot I had that. And then I'm flooded with the songs that, that age. Again, it's something that you put away in the corner. But when I was first having the memories, Kay Cooke, that someone suggested that there was a group, like a group, a therapist ran this group, the Help Me group. And I went. It was interesting. Someone said, it's going to be all women, and most of them were molested by a man, so you've got to be okay. I went, and they would go around and have everybody tell their story, if you will. I told mine. People cry. They hug each other. I mean, it was a nice group of people. X amount of weeks later, came around to me again. Louis, tell us your story. I said, I did. I don't want to tell it again. There was no benefit, but this was familiar turf for the people that went. And that's what they were comfortable with, like commiserating. And personally, I'm not saying others didn't gain from it. You realize you're not the only one, certainly. But it just seemed that I would feel worse after than when I got there. They seemed to all want to tell their horror stories, and everybody would hug and cry, and there seemed to be no benefit for me.
And probably, I'm making a big assumption here, but probably you'd already decided you wanted to get better, you wanted to move on, you wanted to forget it, you wanted a brave new future. Sometimes, and this isn't always conscious, but sometimes people are not ready to move on, and the benefits to them staying stuck in their narrative outweigh the benefits of being brave enough to move forward into a new world. And we also have to look at the sort of social emotional part of our brain, that how we bond with people. We bond emotionally with people, and we trade stories. And if the story has the same or a similar resonance, sort of energetic resonance or emotional resonance, then that's a great way to bond. And so that holds people stuck.
You stay stuck. Yeah.
Because, there's like, now I feel I feel like
Bonded.
I'm not on my own anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm getting attention. Somebody's listening to me. Somebody's really getting me. And it feels very safe for that part of your brain, the mammalian brain, the social emotional brain. And, you know, this is something I often try to help parents consider, particularly parents with slightly older children and into their teenage years, which is busy parents, haven't got a moment to spare. Kids sort of just do what they do until the child has a problem. And then suddenly parent is all over the child. And on one level, that child's brain is suddenly feeling bonded, connected, emotionally, more strongly connected to the parent than they were before. And so I asked the question, be careful. Well, it's not a question. I make the statement, be careful what you bond over. And then I asked the question, what, you know, if you look at the amount of time that you spend with this could be a friend, it can be a colleague, it can be a child, it can be any other human being, but what are the conditions of your connection? Because if you make it all about sharing horror stories, dramas, traumas, then that's the level at which you hold each other. I prefer to bond with people who open my mind and, you know, where can we go next, and how exciting and wonderful life is. And of course we have difficult times. And of course we sometimes want to go home and say, do you know what, that was effing rubbish, and that's so-and-so did blah, blah, blah. Well, express it, that's okay. But if that's the key, and this is the problem with help groups, is they can, you know, you become defined by a set of emotions like a glue that hold you in place, and which is what you described, I think.
And Kay Cooke, when you, again, back to happy brain, again, you giving young people tools that are going to be so vitally important for them in their life, and dealing, you know, everybody has something going on. It's not, everything isn't always wonderful. Everybody's got challenges, I'll say. Go ahead.
Right. And so, you know, we look at I see a lot of young people in their late teens and early 20s who have no resilience. And by that, I mean, they've been often very loved, very cared for, very protected, but what they haven't learned neurologically is to fall down and pick themselves back up again, because the caring adults have been busy protecting them from feeling bad, because we've been sold a bit of a dream. You should feel great all the time. You deserve to feel amazing and wonderful all the time. You should not feel bad or sad. And that's bullshit. Yes, it is. Because, you know, we have these amazing abilities to glide through each and every day, experiencing a whole wide range of chemical sensations that we call emotions. And to sort of go, those ones are good and those ones are bad, kind of denies our nature, you know, how we are. So what sometimes, as you know, the kids who they've never experienced being really hungry for something. I don't mean, well, maybe food, but really hungry for desire and tenacity to go forward and to make a plan and to work towards it, and maybe fail a bit, so that then they come back up and have to learn how to adapt and stay focused and get the big payoff. I did that on my own. And that, when we build those patterns into the nervous system, then they become patterns of success for life. And they're also internally based. And by that, I mean the person they belong to the person. The opposite of that is what is often termed the woke brigade, if you like. And that is again, just structurally, this is about saying, I don't feel good right now, so I need you to do something different. And when you change, then I'll feel good. And that's perpetuated by every industry now, but the big marketeers that try and sell you, buy that brand, then you'll feel good. Wear that makeup, then you'll feel good. Have that cosmetic surgery, then you'll feel good. So there's lots and lots of influence in that. But if you just strip it away and go, okay, this principle of, if I change the outside world, then I'll feel good, is asked backwards, because that's not how we can be successful. We are successful when we organize the inside world to feel good, and then we've got much better negotiation with the outside world. Because if you give all your power away, that's great if you're in charge and you say, you must change, and somebody changes. Okay, that's a temporary fix. But if they don't, or they do something that offends you or upset you, you've given all your power away, because it was on the outside all the time. But that doesn't make sense to me. How do we evolve as a human species if it's not how nature works? We're part of nature. A storm comes, the tree blows over, and it either reorganizes itself and adapts and remembers, or it goes to seed. But if we haven't got that ability to fall over, come back up, to adapt in some way, and then move forward, how do we learn?
That's wonderful. I love how you explain
it. The surface,
it is. And again, your website, tell us.
Is www.thehappybrainco.com.
And we've got those links up at louisfreeshow.com and wfmj.com, thehappybrainco.com. And you can get a wealth of information there. And again, your book, The Happy Brain, Next Generation Thinking. And I love that. I would love to see that in schools. It's so vitally important. We always want to say now more than ever, always. Maybe more so now with how everything is going in the world, yet important. And it would be great to see it. It should be. It needs to be part of the curriculum. And you give them tools and foundation. Go ahead, Kay.
Thank you for that, and for that plug. What I would also say is that book is the result of 10 years of my work and case studies. And it comes from a whole range of personal experiences as a teacher, as a coach, as a parent in particular. And it draws down from lots and lots of different models of education and science and so on. But it is held together, it is glued together by the technology of NLP, which I just...
Linguistic programming,
so super important in bringing consciousness into the living organism. And so we train people in Happy Brain as a specialist application of NLP for people who want to work with young people.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. I want to get into your new book, Inspirations for Thriving Through Chaos. So and I've got a lot of questions, a lot I want to talk about, Kay. But talk with us a little bit about your inspiration, if you will, to putting this book together.
So when we went into lockdown, the beginning of 2020, in fact, I think the first time I did an interview with you was in March 2020 when I was in Orlando in a hotel room, and the whole world was going into lockdown, and we didn't know what was happening. And indeed, I just got home before the UK fully locked down. And of course, we all had to reset, and we all of our resiliences were tested, so to speak. So like everybody else, I thought, okay, what do I need to do here? What can I do? One of the things I could do and did do was to learn how to use Zoom. I think we're all pretty good.
We all,
now, but I wasn't then. The second thing I thought was, well, okay, what can I do for others to keep some level of communication going? So I ran some free programs, just to help people on a weekly basis. And then I had the idea that wouldn't it be, I was running some like I think they're called podcasts or video casts.
Yeah.
But conversations, because I think conversations are, as we were saying off air, conversations are so powerful because there's something in a conversation for most people. They can be very inspirational. So I was having a few conversations, public conversations on Facebook and YouTube and so on. And the first big one that I organized was with Dr. Richard Bandler, and who very kindly agreed to a video that, a Zoom call, should I say, that we could record that was based on resilience. And that was really great. It was always, as always, spot on for what was needed at the time. And then I thought, all right, okay, this is kind of cool. We can continue this. So I had different interviews with different people, including John Laval, Kathleen Laval, Kate Benson, Joy Angelthorne, yourself, and a few, and some people who, to me, are they are inspirational in their own way, and also the conversation would produce inspiration for well-being, because no matter how shitty the world was at the time, we could always look towards what skills do we need to keep people orientated towards their best possible chance of flourishing. So that was kind of what went on. But all the time I was gathering these interviews, I was thinking there's some really great material in here. And I'm not a big social media marketeer, and I don't get the 10 billion people following and it just seemed such a waste to have such valuable information on one channel only. So long story short, last year, about this time last year, I thought, right, I'm going to start to go through the transcripts and see what we can harvest in a way that we'll be able to put together a book, which of course we did. We put together the book, Inspirations for Thriving Through Chaos, which was published early at the beginning of this year. And so basically it's 11 of my favorite inspirers, and lovely conversations, all sorts of different topics, and so there's something in there for everyone. And although some of it, or 10 of the 11 interviews, were set during lockdown, actually the topics are as relevant today as they have ever.
I'm glad you said that, because that's what I was thinking. And I was going to say that there's always some chaos, if you will. There's always going to be something, and to thrive through it and to read this and gain those tools and understand is so important for everything. Again, earlier this morning, I was talking with someone and I said, well, pre-COVID, everything is like pre-COVID, COVID, and I was going to say post-COVID, but we just don't know. We don't know. And having these and being inspired by them, I think, is really important. I love the dedication. Can you talk a little bit about that?
You
okay with that?
Yeah.
Beautiful. It was beautiful when I was a little girl. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Or do you want to read it?
Yeah, shall I read it?
I would love that.
And then I wouldn't change it in any way. When I was a little girl, I wanted to be wise like my daddy, who seemed to know everything about everything. But as I grew up, I discovered that, in fact, he didn't know everything, because, as I later realized, his knowledge, understanding, and perspective expanded through time. His endless curiosity and fascination for how life works, and his ability to perceive that from so many perspectives, taught me to constantly seek great wisdoms that reveal themselves through the process of lifelong learning. Dad, you are a constant inspiration.
It's absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I love that. And you think about that again, that curiosity and how we should be always learning and always growing, evolving. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what we're here to do. And sometimes it feels, certainly in my line of work, that sometimes people are taking backward steps, and that I believe is preventable.
So
we don't know our potential, do we? We don't know our potential. But, when you were born on planet Earth as this little sort of bundle of unlimited potential, you'll never know whether you've realized it. Even when you get to the pearly gates, you'll still never know. So why not make that a lifelong mission to discover more about the places your brain can go to, what your body can do, how you can interact in the world around you? But why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? Yeah. I've said, even in my 69th year, and I've said this a lot on the show, I still love when I'll hear something or read something and I'll say, wow, I never thought about it like that. Too many people we were talking about before just want to read something that affirms or what they already believe. And I'll use my mind blown by something. It's like, wow, I never thought about it like that. I love that, and that's part of the process. It should be. I
think so. That's what brings me alive. And I know it's not the same for everybody, but yes, it's so the model in my head is the synapses firing off in new places. Haven't been there before.
Yeah.
That place where, in the olden days, they said, don't go to the edge of the world because you'll fall off, or there are dragons, at that boundary. Well, let's go find out.
That's right. I love that. And that constant curiosity and constant learning. So let's, and again, got links up to the book, Inspirations for Thriving Through Chaos, Inspiring Conversations with Kay Cooke. And I love what you said about Zoom. I think we've all learned more about Zoom. And forgive me, I'm telling my stories, but I remember when I had, and I can't remember if they were kids that were in college or late high school, university, whatever. And I was talking, and at that time, I was just thrilled that I could do Skype.
Yeah.
And I remember this one young lady, she didn't say it me, she just said, oh, Skype, I haven't used that since I was in middle school. And I talk about making someone feel really old. It's like, because the technology is changing, but Zoom has been so vitally important certainly through the pandemic, but to be able to connect with people.
Yeah.
And I love when you say that about doing that and doing the work that you do. The thought of not having something like Zoom through the pandemic, in the pandemic is.
And it's part of that sort of basic need of connection. We have found new ways to connect. It's not perfect. Sure. There's nothing quite like physical connection with other human beings, but at least we can feel connected. And I think it's been invaluable for people who've been apart from their family, for example. I know that we now, my personal family, my parents and my siblings, we have a Zoom call every Wednesday night tonight.
That's wonderful. Oh, that's.
And it's lovely. And we wouldn't have had that had it not been for lockdown, because we all live in different places. We can't get together very often. Sure. And now we do. So there are lots of positive. Louis, I would just like to say that you're chapter 6 in the book.
I'm embarrassed. Okay.
I told you I had 3 favorite chapters, and yours is one of them. I love it. Thank you so much for allowing me to harvest from our conversations.
Okay, thank you so much, because again, I was blown away when you reached out about including it in the book. Truly honored by that, and thank you for doing that. And you wanted me, if you don't mind if I say I couldn't read the transcript. It was like whatever you had was okay. I don't know if I told you that. It was just like, I don't know. This is terrible. I get so self-deprecating sometimes, so shy. I just couldn't read my words. It's kind of like, trying to, one of the radio stations I was at, they would edit down something for a replay or to fill in somewhere. And after a very short period of time, they said, Louis, we don't need you to be here because it would be like, oh my God, why did I say that? Why didn't I ask that? Am I saying, did I say that? If I can hear myself, I would be so self-critical about it, and I would want to edit. If it was a 30-minute interview, it'd probably get down to like 5 minutes by the time I was done. So they just sent me on my way and did it elsewhere. But I don't know if I told you that. I just couldn't, I don't know.
Well, we did that very, very much. We went through all of the transcripts and took out, all the extra bits, and we did some cut and paste. And I say we, that's my editor, Jane Pikett. And
Jane's wonderful. Yeah.
She is, indeed. A shout out to Jane, who I've just spent this morning with, actually. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah?
And because we're working on some other projects together.
You don't want to, can you say at this point, or?
Yeah. Well, we have a number of projects, but one of them is the children's books that I've written. I've written 2 children's books this year, and now we're creating workbooks, or I'm creating at the moment.
That's wonderful.
That will help. So it's a bit hard to describe, really. That the children's books are packed with skills and. That's my dog making that noise, by the way.
Is your dog there? Is dog in the room?
Yeah. Do you want to see it?
I would love to. For listeners, I would love to. In fact, I know this is so unprofessional on my end. It's so, but it is. I am what I am.
Very, very old lady called Molly.
Oh, listeners, you ought to see this. I'll post a picture up. I'm going to take a picture. Again, so unprofessional, so raw, if you will. Oh, I love that.
So she's
how old is she?
15.
Oh, wow.
And she has a dreadful background. She was a very high profile rescue dog. She's been on all sorts of television programs, where they do RSPCA rescue and things like that. Yeah, she was quite a celebrity in the first few years that we had a big RSPCA case for us in the UK. Where they had a house full of very neglected animals. And so the pictures of Molly when they found her, it was just disgusting. It was awful. So anyway, we're very fortunate to be able to rehabilitate her. And so we've had her 10 years now. Which
that's
is
beautiful. How did you?
Not failure. So we're in her end stage, but we never expected her to live this long. So she's just adorable.
When you, how did you come by her? How did that happen that you adopted her?
Well, we had another dog, a border terrier called Oscar, who passed in February this year, and he was 17, so he'd had a great life also. And so about 10 years ago, we thought, he needs a playmate, and so we started to look around for a playmate for him, and we just looked at various rescue dogs. We wanted a rescue dog, and then we met Molly, and she sort of chose us, really, I would say.
Isn't that, one of the things, since you mentioned that, and I've talked about this a lot on the show before, one of the things and we've had dogs and cats, and for quite a while we had taken in a number of rescue rabbits, which are very different. Obviously, they're prey animals. I mean, they're very, very, very different, but wonderful. And one in particular, one of the things, the resilience and the beauty of animals that sometimes humans just don't have these traits. It was interesting because this rabbit had been abused for a while and then terribly neglected in a big box in a garage. They fed her, but it was terrible. When we took her in, she was just frightened. She would see my hands and scream. And if you ever heard a rabbit scream, it's just blood curdling, and she'd back up. She went from that, and a lot of just loving her and letting her do her thing to warm up. And Kay Cooke, what was interesting is she went from that, just being terrified because she had been so hurt for so long, to when I get ready to go to do the gig in the morning, I have a backpack. I throw the backpack. She'd run over and pull on my pant leg on my jean and put her head down. She wanted me to pet her. And then I would put the backpack. She would do it over and over. And how I interpret that is the resilience, again, and understanding that, yes, I was hurt, but it wasn't this guy. This guy loves me. And that's something that humans, too often, I don't want to say won't do. It's like, well, I've been hurt. I'm never going to love again. I'm never going to open my heart again. And here was this little rabbit that caught on that, yeah, I was hurt. It was horrible, but it wasn't this. This guy loves me. And I'm calling it resilience. It just, you working with people, you find people that are closed down, that I won't, I don't, I can't.
Yeah.
All the negative.
And again, it's hugely complex, but on the simplest level, in the same way that I use the analogy of plants or trees in nature, we learn so much about animals, and because we have a part of our brain that's the same, an animal brain, mammalian brain, and the bit that distinguishes us between them and us is that we've got this extra bit of cortical structure that gives us consciousness, gives us awareness of ourselves. Prefrontal cortex in particular. So we can make plans, and we can judge and analyze and plan and organize our thinking. So that's but if you really want to sort of understand how simple the lower part of your own brain can be, then just simply watch the animals. And training dogs or training an animal is no different to training any nervous system in a mammal. So why, there's just lots to learn, as you say. So the associations that your rabbit now has with you rewards the rabbit, whereas the association the rabbit had with somebody else caused them pain and suffering. So the nervous system remembers those two things and makes the distinction. What happens in a human is then we come in with a new level of, well, that means, and then we can start to make stories about it. And the stories that we tell ourselves are very powerful.
Talk a little bit more about that, Kay Cooke, the stories we tell ourselves.
Well, I suppose the sad, and we'll start with a sort of sad story, I suppose, where you have somebody who is in their 60s or 70s who can't forgive a family member for something that they did 60 years ago. But it's not just not forgiving, it's that they've regurgitated the narrative and blown it up into something huge, and traded it and with other people and got other people on board. Those kind of things seem terribly limiting to me. They seem to stop people going, yeah, that shit's behind me. Now I can move forward. This is my life. What can I do with it? Rather than, it's what the metaphor it's often used is the baggage people carry. And sometimes, you can question, you can heal, that there are definitely things to be healed, but the story that we tell ourselves is important. You know, how you perceive yourself, how you because you're saying something out loud, the power of the words, you're saying it out loud and it's influencing people around you, but it's also coming back in and influencing you. And the same with thought patterns. You know, somebody who lies in bed going, what's the point? What's the point? What's the point? What's the point? Your brain's listening. What is the point? It can't answer that question. And so it goes round and round trying to figure out. No different to somebody lying in bed saying, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Brain's like, oh, I'll try and find you an answer. And
something's wrong.
And it you know, I see this a lot with parents who, you know, what's wrong with my child? What's wrong with my child? Okay, maybe that needs to be addressed, but at least keep it in balance. What's right with your child? At least balance it. I was reminded just the other day of an article I'd written some time ago about a couple that I was working with in family coaching, and they came along for a session, and I said, oh, you know, how's the week been? And then I can't remember, I timed it. It was something like 6.5 minutes of everything that their teenage son had done wrong, everything that they could possibly drag up about the negative stuff around the son. And so I just sat and listened, and they went blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, so that's 6.5 minutes. Now I'm going to reset the timer. Can we have 6.5 minutes of the fun and the nice time, and, you know, the things that you've liked and enjoyed, and, you know, that you've loved. And they were like, it's
a challenge, right?
Yeah, because and this is repetition in the brain. You set those filters in place to practice, only searching, filtering for what's wrong. Brain does it on autopilot, and it closes people down, and it closes relationships down.
When Kay Cooke, when you say that, and I love that, you set up the same time for them to say the positives, and it sounds like it was a bit challenging for them, at least initially, to come up with that. And therefore, what message are they giving your child, you know, when you're highlighting or only seeing the negatives?
Yeah, and, you know, we were talking about the narratives that the stories we tell ourselves, and that includes the stories we tell ourselves about other people. So if the story you tell yourself about your child is there's something wrong with them, then that turns into a belief, and that belief drives everything you then do. So these things they're easy to slip into. That's why we have to bring an awareness, a consciousness into everyday relating, so that we get to have some fun and enjoyment and inspiration and thriving, and focusing on, you know, if you go for a walk in nature, focusing on the beauty, the aesthetic, rather than ruminating over something somebody said to you last week at work.
It doesn't. When you again, let me preface by saying there are some people close to me that call me the king of the bad analogy. So maybe this is one, but it works for me in my head. If you're at a buffet, you are filling your plate with the things that you like. There's things that you don't like or won't eat. Why would you focus on that? You're filling your plate. You should be filling your plate with the things that you do like or want to try. Maybe that's a bad analogy, but again, you don't go up there. I don't like that. I don't like that. What do you like? Am I making any sense, Kay?
Absolutely. But even that, Louis, you know, the awareness of what you like. A lot of people eat on autopilot. And one of my bad analogies perhaps is People say, I want to stop smoking, or I want to stop eating cream cakes or something. And my first position on that is, do you really? Or is that a story that you think you should? Yeah, you should stop. But do you really want to? And then let's look at how you are doing that behavior. My guess is that people have their cigarettes or their cream cakes or whatever, and they give themselves a really hard time over it. I shouldn't be doing this, shouldn't be doing this, shouldn't be doing this. They feel really bad. They stress their bodies. Well, why? Maybe it's bad enough that you choose unhealthy behaviors, but then to surge the body with cortisol, adrenaline, and all this sort of stress hormones on top of that, so let's just start with, from now on, every cigarette you have or every cream cake you eat, do it consciously and love every second of it. Because when you do it consciously, it changes everything.
That's interesting. I know someone who had smoked, I want to say a lifelong smoker, who smoked for many, many decades and quit. And when I was asking about that, she had said that, well, I always had the mindset of what was I giving up?
Yeah.
To not smoke. What was I giving up? She said, when I flipped it around, what am I gaining as a non-smoke? Health, just a lot of things. And it was just that simple flip. I shouldn't say simple, but flipping it around, and she just stopped smoking. She said she had a patch on for a couple of days, took the patch off. She said, I'm a non-smoker.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting, is what am I gaining? I'll be, health-wise, everything.
There's a lovely visual diagram of what you're describing, which is when people's lives get bad and they want to, so the doctor says you must stop smoking, for example, or they feel fat or something like that, and they get really intense, and they get such an intense stress that they want to get away from, that it gives them a propulsion to change the behavior. I don't want to be fat. I don't want to smoke. I don't want to be fat. I don't want to smoke. I don't want to be, and it's so intense. It gives that propulsion to change the behavior. And so the graph kind of zooms up, and then suddenly the brain goes, aha, I no longer smoke. Aha, I'm no longer fat. Aha, I'm no longer dead. So now the brain's like, oh, thank goodness for that. And then it relaxes, because it's got nowhere else to go. And so old habits come back online, and before you know it, they're re-engaged with the behavior. So it's a typical pattern for called yo-yo behaviors. But the antidote to that is exactly as you've described, which is, yes, you want a propulsion system that gets you away from what you don't want, but you really want to have clarity about what you do want, so that your brain is both, oh, don't like that, but oh, look at that version of me out there in the future. I look so healthy, and look at all the things that I'm going to be doing, and I'm going to be smelling great, and we build that. In NLP, it's called a well-formed outcome. We need to make sure that the whole system is taken care of, so the brain gets the initial trajectory, but then it knows where to go next. And
I love that. I'm talking with Kay Cooke, and again, it's thehappybrainco.com, thehappybrainco.com. Of course, links up at louisfreeshow.com. And what's the new site? The louisbefree.com, and of course WFMJ.com. The young techies, they correct me all the time about which I should say, which I shouldn't say, and I've got to learn it. In the book, again, I love it, Inspirations for Thriving Through Chaos, Inspiring Conversations with Kay Cooke. You were mentioning that you had some favorites, and they're all wonderful. Tell us about another one. Another favorite, if you will.
Another favorite of mine is is chapter 2 by Alexander Miller, who is an artist. And I think the reason that that chapter for me is one of my favorites is, again, a bit like our conversations, they just flow. So my conversations with Richard and Kathleen and Kate and everybody else, they're really great and really, really inspirational. But those, well, partly because they're very familiar and very focused on a particular skill set, NLP, for example, whereas my conversation with you is way much more wide-ranging, and my conversation with Alexander Miller was also wide-ranging, and it was just such an easy flow to get into, and he's just such a great artist who I met. I had an art gallery many years ago, and when I first met him, he was still a window cleaner and
Wow.
painting in his part-time. And he brought some artwork into the gallery, and I said, well, okay, I'll try it on the wall, put it up on the wall, and just observed the customers' natural responses to it. So he had a formula of painting old working class men, gadgies, as they were called in Scotland, who were sort of coming back from the shipyards or from the mine or something, and they were always walking away, so you never saw their faces, you just saw their outlines. And what people would walk past and they would just go, oh, that's just like my Uncle Jack, or, oh, that's just like my dad.
Yeah.
So they were making an emotional connection. And that's what I discovered in the art world, is when people some people buy for financial logical investment.
Sure, yeah.
Some people buy because they want to be seen to have a certain thing in their home. But the real one, and the ones that I love, are the ones who just go, I love that. That means something to me. And that's how his art works. So we went from selling, I think, early paintings, oil paintings, for £350. And by the time I sold the gallery, we were selling them for £35,000.
Wow.
He regularly sells work at well over £100,000 and has several galleries and is internationally acclaimed. And so his rise to stardom I was a part of, and so that it was just such a privilege to witness and be a part of that. And just the way he talks so gently, so genuinely. And he did had a gallery in New York City. He had an exhibition in New York City. It's all in the book, based on racism. And his shout out to, he created some beautiful visuals after 9/11 of the Black firefighters who lost their lives because they had not been acknowledged in the white press. And so it's, for me, that's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, and we think about that 9/11. I always think, I've had a number of what they were called at the time the Jersey girls whose husbands were killed or murdered in 9/11, and it always, since you mentioned 9/11, always makes me think of one of them who said that she was on an exercise machine listening to music, didn't hear the phone ring, and it was her on the answering. He was telling her, goodbye and I love you, and just forgive me, but I always think of that 9/11 and what happened, and I love that he did pictures to the acknowledgement. I think it's so.
It was it's great. So yes, that's in the book. Yes. My brain's gone off in
that's Inspirations for Thriving Through Chaos, Inspiring Conversations with Kay Cooke. Want to tell us another one?
My third favorite, well, no, it's not, there is no order to this, but they're all my favorites. I love them all. I just want to make that absolutely clear. And they've all got really important messages in them. But one of my closest, most favorite friends is in chapter 11. And so Heiko, who just takes a different perspective on, he works in the energy healing world. He just takes a different perspective on what chaos is, what thriving is. So a much broader perspective. And actually that was, we recorded that literally 2 weeks before the book went to print. I was telling him about it, and he said, well, why didn't you interview me? And I said, well, I don't know, because I talk to him every week. So why didn't I interview you? Well, that's a good point. So yeah, well, let's do it.
That's great.
And it really sort of, for me, that I really like big picture. I like to see the bigger perspective. Yeah. And so he, having his vision on the bigger perspectives of how thriving works, and how, well, it's in the book. It's a really
beautiful. I love the book, and they're all wonderful chapters. When you said that you did it right before, Jane Bikett must have, like, I shouldn't say freaked out, but it's like, you want to do what now?
Well, she actually, with Jane, bless her, I edited, I didn't give Heiko's to her. Well, that's not true. She checked it for grammar and syntax. But I had edited that entirely, because the way that he uses the language, the energy of words, so very specifically, I really wanted to try to protect that as much as, and keep it as close as I possibly. Yeah. So, but having said that, I mean, Jane is an amazing editor, and she's edited lots of Richard Bandler's books, and Owen Fitzpatrick, and
Owen, yeah, he's been on, I like Owen.
So she's pretty cool.
She's very, very, very wonderful. What kind of response are you getting to the book, Inspirations for Thriving Through Chaos, Kay Cooke?
The ones that have surprised me are, occasionally I've seen, quite accidentally on social media, somebody will post a picture of themselves reading the book. And I love that, because that's genuine. It's not solicited. I'm not a big fan of soliciting feedback, because you get it for the wrong reasons. So those that they've been wonderful. So some people that having a coffee reading the book, or somebody posted on an aeroplane reading the book, and so those are nice. What other feedback have we had?
The unsolicited. I like that. I like when you say that, because it can be.
I think it's the only way, and unfortunately in this modern age of algorithms, that's not how you get popular. Certainly on social media, you have to play a hard game, and I don't like that. I know my business advisors will tell me to play the game, but I really think it's insincere. It's the same
Very
with
much so.
It's the same with Amazon reviews as well. I'm told that it's very common to have to pay people to give reviews, and
to actually pay them.
Wow. Some of the publishing coaches say that. So I don't know. So to answer your question, whether the review, the biggest, I suppose, the most regular comment is, it's a dip in and out of book.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
Dip in and out of. You dip into it.
Which is great, because you can pick a chapter and read it and then go somewhere. Yeah, that's wonderful about it. A dip in and out. I love that. A dip in and out book. I've got a couple of email questions I'd like to kind of put together. You mentioned, I hope you don't mind if I go here, but about social media. Again, everybody with the selfies. And again, I understand if you're at Stonehenge, of course, you want to kind of that I was here. It's not just a picture. I get that, but people miss the experience because they're so busy either looking at their phone or taking selfies or whatever. What impact do you think the whole social media, I'm trying to condense a couple of these emails, are going to have on especially young people? Again, it's going to be different for someone of my age. I have to remember to post things. I have to remember to post, et cetera. But young people that are, I don't want to say obsessed, but concerned about how many likes they get or how many, I'll do air quotes, someone's going to see friends. Someone said to me a while back, well, you're talking about someone, well, you're friends with them on Facebook. I said, well, that's a Facebook, air quote, friend. Yes, there are people on Facebook that are actual friends of mine, and even some that I've met through Facebook that are long distance away. What kind of impact do you think on especially young people's minds with social media today?
It's a piece of string. I think let's take a few different perspectives on it. If you take the perspective that you've alluded to, the one of popularity, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is if you rate your validity as a human being based on how popular you are, then it makes you very vulnerable. And the idea of being popular by digitally enhancing a picture of yourself and having thousands of likes, it really distorts the whole sense of identity. And so as an experience, I think that is deeply unhealthy, and it reinforces and contributes greatly to mental health problems, because how we perceive ourselves in the world is very important. Social media also is used a lot for bullying, and we've all seen hideous comments made on social media, and there are some really nasty, vicious people who aren't held responsible for or accountable for what they say, because they can do it anonymously through a pseudonym or anyway. So that messes with yet again how somebody perceives themselves, because it's not nice to have people disliking you. It's just not a nice thing. And I think you and I have discussed previously, we've both experienced haters. We know what it's like. We maybe can deal with that a little bit better as adults, but when you are a young person, everything in your biology is screaming for you to belong to a social group that will support you and keep you safe and help you to grow and stay valid. So yeah, that's messy. What's another perspective? Let's go for a positive one. A positive aspect of social media is, or maybe a little bit more widely, screen time, is the access to information. It's double-edged because, and I do it now. I have so many books at home. I'm a bookaholic, but
you and I both, as you can see from here, and stacks there, and countless books at home.
But I no longer look up rarely look up something factual in a book. I just go online, and within 3 heartbeats, I can usually find some information. And because I'm looking for the information and gathering it in the same few breaths, then it's much more likely that information will stick inside my mind. I've gone in search of it, I've found it, it makes sense, my brain chemistry remembers it, is much more likely to remember it. So from a seeking of information point of view in how people learn, I think screens, the internet
Sure.
is phenomenal. And to an extent, social media is a bit like that. Every now and again, if I'm a little bit bored, I'll just scroll through Instagram videos, and most of them are pretty boring. But every now and again, something will come up, maybe a National Geographic, and it will be, it'll be
Fascinating.
beautiful, or something about an animal or something.
I love the one. Yeah, I love the one. That's something that I can watch. A lot of the animal videos that people make that are absolutely wonderful. That's always a joy to watch.
So, and our brains, the young brains particularly, they're processing information far faster than our old brains. So that all kind of works. Another perspective maybe would be the sense of connection that we feel, we talked about before. The young kids who are on WhatsApp, and they've got their group chats, and so they're constantly. I had a young girl visiting, a relative visiting my house recently, and the trend at school was suddenly crystals, and I said, come this way. I have I have quite a few. And she's like, oh, this is amazing. This is amazing. So she's WhatsApping her friends with pictures, and then they're looking up the crystals to find out, what they're called, and using an app, and sharing that information. So that I love that, because not only did she get a lot of pleasure, but she was sharing it with somebody else, and they were on a learning journey together as well. So that's
one of the good,
that is a good thing. I think I can't comment truly on social media for young people, because I'm an old person and I am on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, which I'm told are just not where the young
Facebook.
people are.
Yeah, I hear that from young people. That's not,
So, but I think there is a greater awareness of the word algorithm. I think gradually young people, through their parents, are beginning to understand that, in Facebook terms anyway, I'm really lucky. My feeds are full of lovely things, because that's the algorithm that I have created. I hear other people say, oh God, honestly, my Facebook feed is filled with awful things. And I'm like,
what are they clicking? What are they like?
So that cause and effect loop is important to recognize, that, we
reinforces
what we do creates the thing that we're going to see more of. And that's quite an important message in life, really. What you're doing today will resonate out, and will draw back more of that for tomorrow. I think beyond that, I'm not really able to comment on social media for young people, because I don't know the modern platforms for them. I hear TikTok, for example, I hear. I am concerned that so many young people's big ambition is to be famous.
To be a
star,
social media,
an
influencer. That's it. As an ambition, and I understand it can be economically beneficial, but it's just interesting when I've heard young people or seen young people interviewed, and that's what they aspire to. It's just, I don't know, to be an influencer.
And there's something energetically dissonant for me in that, which is, so if you think about what's the energy of influencing somebody, is you're going out and you're having power, so to speak, over someone else. And you can get them to do things differently. And this is all part of what we talked about earlier, this idea of my happiness depends on my ability to influence the outside world. And I don't like that pattern.
I don't either. A quick story, if you don't mind. I had an aunt that died a few years back. She was 99 years old, and she always knew what was going on in the news. Last couple of years of her life, some dementia and things, but she always knew, and I would go see her after the show every day, and she always wanted to talk about the news, always wanted to talk. She was very bright, just really, I'll never forget walking into her room one day when she looked troubled, puzzled, and I said, "Hey, Natalie, what's going on?" She said, "I don't understand it." She said, "You've got to explain to me, why are the Kardashians on the news?" Now, and I think about it, because, on the news, okay, on one of the, I don't know, celebrity shows or whatever, I get that. Trying to explain to her, because I was trying to figure it out my own self. Why are they on the news, on a news broadcast? They're talking. And it was interesting, because there she was with some early stage dementia, always watched the news and couldn't figure out why. And it's was very interesting to me when she said that.
Well, I can't figure out why either.
Yeah, I can't
With or without dementia.
And people aspire to that, again, being an influencer, and that's a bit troubling to me. Again, for those that have a huge following and get paid, okay, if that's your job, I guess, and
But what do you do to do?
But I don't get that.
There's something about, people ask me, how do you build self-esteem? It's very common, or they'll say, my child has no self-esteem, or I have no self-esteem. And you go, okay, so let's explore, what do we mean by self-esteem? What actually is going on there? And for me, the explanation is very simple. It's twofold. It's doing the right things for the right reasons. Yeah. But it's in terms of patterns, brain patterns, your brain sets out to do something. It does that thing. It learns whether it's done it successfully or not, and adjusts until it has done it successfully. And then there's the big payoff. There's the big chemical payoff that goes, aha, I did that.
I did that. Yeah.
Now, subconsciously, that learning loop is teaching the brain to reward itself. So that's what self-esteem to me is the ability to know that you can do something. Then you've got to ask the question, why would you be doing it? And there's something in the shallowness, if you like, of being famous because you take good selfies, yeah, or doing something worthwhile and getting recognition for it. They're different things. So, you could argue, I can't think of a good example. What are you offering the world? What's your gift for the world? So your gift for the world, you might be famous because you're a radio show host, because you give airspace to lots of people, you facilitate lots of really interesting conversations that are of service in some way to the world. My gift for the world, facilitate other people's well-being system. So we may or may not be so-called famous, but whatever it is, it's because we're offering something, we're being of service in some way
to the world,
and that helps us to feel good about ourselves in some way. But if you're only famous, so-called famous, because you can stand up and do a silly dance on TikTok, yeah, I kind of think, how does that mess with your sense of self? Because then your self-esteem is what coming, again, it's from the outside.
Outside. No, I get that, Kay Cooke. I've got to, it's interesting when you say that about, it comes elsewhere, and that, some of the things with, again, social media can be very, like most things, can be very good and important, and you can learn and read about different things, see different things, different people, etc. It can also be, again, I get concerned about that on especially the young brains and how that's their reward system. If something, again, I don't want this to sound self-serving. I love donating blood to the Red Cross, because for me, that I'm going there. They can't at this point make blood. There's no way of making blood at this point. I'm sure someday they'll figure something out. Maybe, I don't know. But it's nice because I donate my blood and it goes somewhere. No one's coming up to me and saying, "Oh my God, thank you. That pint of blood that you gave saved my life, my kids' life." It's just doing good because you want to do good, and you're not getting the reward is knowing that I can do it and able to do it. Again, I don't want to make this too self-serving, but I look forward to giving blood because of that. It goes somewhere. No one's coming up and saying, "Hey, thanks for doing that. Thanks for doing that." Of course, the Red Cross thanks you. I mean, I get that, but you don't know where it's going, but it's going to help someone. And as opposed to the selfies.
The difference between the connectiveness of us all versus the insular silo thinking, and that silo insular thinking doesn't contribute to evolution of humanity.
Yes.
And I think that's very sad, because we have great potential to collaborate, to support each other, and to grow together. We have great potential for that. But when you go into this is me, this is my world, and you're either in my world or you're not in my world, I think it can be a little bit destructive. And
I agree. And when you think about when we have talked about this before, you touched on it earlier about people feeling that it's okay to say nasty, horrible things. I mean, some of the emails I get, it's just, I don't mind. I appreciate criticism on things or an observation. That's great. That can be really helpful, but just some of the nastiness, and that people, raising that generation, if you don't have something good to say, don't say it about someone. And people feel emboldened, empowered, or whatever to say just horrific things. More so these days than for, like you say, it can be anonymous. You get an email from who knows for somewhere. And that's troubling to me, that trend, if you will. It's getting worse.
I think it's incredibly troubling, but it also reinforces why it's important, in my view, to learn how your brain works, to learn how the meaning part of your brain can be stretched a little bit. So, you've got yourself angry or upset over that comment. So let's deconstruct the comment. What is it you think it means? Could it mean something else? Could it, what's the worst it could mean? What's the best it could mean? What else could it mean? What do you think might be true for that person saying that thing? And so these are the skills that we can use to deconstruct a weapon that can feel like a weapon. Language can be weaponized, and so sometimes we have to use language to de-weaponize it. There's just so many things you can do with one sentence as a skill, when you know how to do that. And I think that's important. It doesn't mean to say it's there are things that are wounding, but the important thing is you don't stay wounded, you don't stay suffering. You find a way to frame it.
When you say that, it makes me think of something I've been saying for years on the show. People want to point the finger, but fear the mirror. They don't want to look at themselves. They don't want to look, they want to point the finger and lash out. And I think that's troubling of what we find with social media today. Too too often. And I've kept you a long time, Kay. I always love talking with you. I'm almost embarrassed to ask this, but a couple of people are emailing about, again, I'm a bit embarrassed. What was it about our conversation that you wanted to, you can tell I'm probably blushing to include it in your book, Inspirations for Thriving Through Chaos. Oh, it's hard for me to even ask.
Well done. Well, I can't say there was any one thing. It was just a no-brainer. It was just,
Really?
you know, we had several conversations.
Yes.
And actually what we put together in that chapter was, I think, an amalgam of at least 2 conversations that felt relevant to the world in which we live. Your ability not only to say things, you shared something about your childhood in an honest, candid way
in the interview.
and you also talked about the self-help group and how that didn't work out for you. Those are important messages. They are important, and so there's that was one tiny aspect, but also you facilitate me being expressive, which is also a great skill, and just, I don't know, the ease at which that you are open to the world being a better place, and that bigger message is what I wanted for the book. You know, the world can be better.
So honored to be included in your book, Inspirations for Thriving Through Chaos. Just thank you. I'm truly honored by that, Kay Cooke. Again, people can go to the happybrainco.com, thehappybrainco.com. Of course, the links are up, and the book, we've got links up to get the book, Inspirations for Thriving Through Chaos. Really important with the messages that are in there. I'm honored. I always love our conversations.
Me too.
So,
Me too.
okay.
Thank you.
Hope I didn't keep you too long. We'll do it again. We'll do it again. And again, the happy brain needs to be in the curriculum everywhere, absolutely everywhere, and to help our world. You know, people get too negative, and I get it. It's the negative things that pop out when we think about the shootings that have happened again, and just the things that are going on. But we've got to give young people and not so young people the tools to have a better brain, a better life.
And that, you know, our future is in their hands.
Yes.
So, you know, we really want to help them to make good decisions on our behalf.
Yeah, that's I love that, Kay Cooke. You're wonderful. I'm grateful.
I'm very grateful too, Louis, and truly it's a pleasure for me. And thank you again for allowing me to publish your chapter in the book. It was an honor for me to do that.
I'm honored to be there. Kay Cooke. Thank you so much. Absolutely wonderful. I love talking with Kay Cooke. And again, the website, we've got the links up at louisfreeshow.com, Louis B. Free at WFMJ.com, etc. The lovely, the wonderful. Oh, and I love the story about the dog that you adopted. That's beautiful. Another beautiful aspect of you. Okay, thank you so much.